Hi, it's GadgetUK here again. This is a follow-on video to the Neo SD review I did recently. That's the flash card, it's kind of EverDriver-like that you can get for the NEO-GEO here for the MVS and now the AES as well. As soon as I got that video finished, actually, literally within 24 hours, the Neo SD team, TerraOnion, they confirmed that the AES version was working. And that was available for pre-order. So I think you can probably still pre-order that now if you haven't done so already. But those are due to ship in early January, I think. There was a little bit of a delay, I think, because the factory was closing down over Christmas. So I think the next set of MVS boards and things were delayed slightly. So those should go out early January as well as the cartridge shells. I think those should come out in the next week or two. So I'm super, excited to get one of those. And there'll probably be another follow-on video actually. But I thought in the meantime it was worth me getting this video out just to talk about some of the experiences I'd had. Because I did mention just briefly in the previous video I've had some problems. As you can see, this is working. I'm going to run through a few different things here. I'll show you it working on the 4 slots. Because that was one of the firmware improvements that the Neo SD team have been working on over the last few weeks. Getting some bugs ironed out really. They tested out on quite a few different models. They've got, I think, at least 7 or 8 different boards there themselves, probably more actually. They've probably got multiple versions of some of the boards they've been testing against. But if you're not aware, there's quite a few different versions of MVS boards. I think that's one of the things that's going to make the AES a little bit easier, because there's only a handful of different AES board revisions. And there are differences actually in the home versions of the system that perhaps mean that 1 or 2 of the problems they've experienced with the MVS shouldn't happen. You've not got multiple slots, for example, in the home versions of the systems. But one of the problems I had, and I'll show you briefly later, the main problem I've had with my MV1FZ here is the fact that the clock, I think there was some jitter on the clock, and I'll show that later, what I had to do to fix it. There's a few things I've done with this MVS actually. I'll just point you down at the MVS, you can see it there. You'll notice it's got feet on there at the moment, stood off the bottom. That's something I've been meaning to do for a while. It's totally unrelated to the problems I've been experiencing here, but whilst I had the problems I stepped through a series of different things to try and remedy it. So one of the first things I did is, I had recapped this MVS about 2 years ago, but I recapped it anyway. It didn't make any difference at all, and the caps that took off were okay. But whilst I was there, I cleaned up some of the solder on some of the wires and things, and I also removed there was a piece of acrylic on the underside, and it was quite tight, and I thought, really shouldn't really have a piece of acrylic so close to the underside of the PCB. So I removed that. Again, that didn't make any difference. But it was just around that time where I was still experiencing some problems with my 1FZ here, and it all seemed to be related to clocks. And I took it back to pieces again, inspected closely, and I was about to get my logic analyzer onto the clocks. Actually, you've got the master clock produced by, I think it's a 24 MHz crystal, and then that feeds into the D0. And I think the LSPC A2 as well, the graphics chip on there, and the clock's divided, and you get additional clocks then that go out to the prog board and primarily the char board. Actually, I think you've got 3 or more clocks go to the char board at different phases, if you like, divisions of that original clock. I think you've got like an 8 MHz clock, a 4 MHz clock, and there might be a 12 MHz clock somewhere, I can't remember. But I was just at that point, and as I was inspecting around the crystal, I noticed that you've got a ground strap, and I'll show this later on. You've got a ground strap that goes over the crystal, and it's generally good practice to ground the cam of the crystal there. It helps with jitter and EMF and stuff like that. So you just get a cleaner clock. And if you look at any of the sort of retro system, I've been looking at some of the boards and things I've got knocking around here, like Commodore 64 boards, and there was something else I was looking at yesterday. I can't remember what it was now. And that, crystal on that again, grounded. A ground strap around the crystal, soldered to the crystal. But on some of these MVS, you might find this more the problem more prevalent in the MV1FZ. I don't know. I suspect so, because nobody else reported any of the problems with single slots apart from me and one other guy, and I think he had a 1FZ. I'm not sure. I think it was. But yeah, that was what it needed. It needed the ground strap there soldered onto crystal. I think a lot of the time it's just glued on, and I'll show you some examples of that. I've got 4 or 5 1FZ boards knocking around here. 2 of them are just waiting for some parts, and then I should be able to test those as well. But I've got another working 1FZ, and that's, you know, it's got the same problem where there's just a bit of glue holding the ground strap onto the crystal, so it's stopping mechanical vibrations, but the strap there is not making, you know, a soldered connection to the crystal, or, you know, a physical connection to the crystal. You know, it's not going to be, you know, carrying anything to ground. On that one, it seems more stable. It works okay, even though it's glued on. But one thing I did find is, as soon as you remove the glue and make sure the strap is not touching the crystal, you get CRC errors. Also, really, again, to thank the Neo SD team, because the amount of work that went in leading up to Christmas and over the Christmas period was just ridiculous, really. You know, they had 4 guys working on this, and they bought an additional number of MVS boards in to try and diagnose the problem I was having and 1 or 2 problems that other people were having. But it was only a few of us. There was only like 2 or 3 people, I think, who had any issues at all. And the 4-slot support as well. They needed to. They knew. You know, that was something to point out. Actually, I wasn't aware at the time when I did that last video that it hadn't been fully tested on 4-slot boards at that time. But I was under the assumption from things I'd read that it had been tested and it worked okay on 2 slots. But let's say I wasn't aware that it wasn't working on 4 slots. So they purchased some 4 slots and things leading up to Christmas, just after the card's release actually, and started working on support there for 4 slots, and they nailed that pretty quickly actually. So I had the benefit really of having some, you know, first-hand experience of testing the 4-slot stuff, the 4-slot support there just before Christmas and over the Christmas period, and that works really well. And you'll notice that was why I got that 4-slot video uploaded a few weeks back now actually, because I'd read something on one of the forums there. People were kicking off saying, you know, it doesn't work on 4 slots and it can't ever work on 4 slots, and that was just complete bullshit. And I wanted to just nip that in the bud really, and just point out actually it's already working on 4 slots really, really stably, no issues whatsoever. And I think that's the case. I think at that point when I uploaded that video, there were no issues at all running on my 4-slot, you know, and I demonstrated it there briefly in that video. You know, programming the car, having it in a multi-cart setup, you know, with 3 of the you know, original MVS carts there, just to show you it was working, and you can toggle between them. And in fact, I've got a second Neo SD board here as well, and I've actually had both Neo SDs in there at the same time as 2 original carts, and no issues at all. You can swap between them and everything runs fine. But the main thing really with this video is just to show you the modification I had to do with my MV1FZ here to get this working 100%. And it's interesting. It's an interesting problem. It wasn't the entire problem. I do think that there was some other timing issues with the old, you know, the original launch firmware that would be hard to expose. And what I mean by that is you'd need to have a specific MVS model, maybe just the MV1FZ. Maybe that's the only one that had that issue. I'm not sure. And it's all about slight timing, subtle timing differences between some of the boards, and it could be to do with some of the components manufactured. You know, the components on there. Not all MV1FZ boards are exactly the same. You know, there has been sort of a cost-cutting exercise there to remove the silk screen on the boards, amongst other things. I think the components are sourced from different places. Some of the types of components are subtly different. Obviously not the main Neo chipset, they're identical between boards as far as I can gather. And of course these things have been used in arcades and pubs and all that, so you know, they've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours on them sometimes, these MVS boards. So you might expect that sometimes the clocks and things generated might not be quite as good as they were on the day they shipped. You know, you might have some very slight differences in timing, or that the logic levels there might be ever so subtly noisy, or not quite the same level as they would be on a brand new out of the, you know, let's say off the production line type board, if you see what I mean. You know, you've got a bit of wear and tear there. So all of those things, let's say, play into the problems that I was having. So the other purpose of this video really was just to show you some of the problems I've had. I'm not going to go into detail, and I will have a bit of text up the top, just says all these problems, you know, are sort of past historic problems related to my MVS, etc. You know, they're not, you won't get them on current firmware. So, you know, it was a combination of some firmware tweaks needed doing, I think, and I don't know, you know, they haven't been really forthcoming in terms of explaining what they've done, but if I was to speculate, I would think they've just been playing around with the timing slightly. They may have been optimising whatever PLL type circuitry they've got going on there to get the best out of it, really, to optimise it, to make sure that it's as synchronised as possible for the variations in MVS boards out there. And that's an important point to note, that they're not, all MVS boards are not the same in terms of the timing. They're very subtly different on some of the edges of some of the clocks and things. And in part that's probably due to not just the different chipsets you get between MVS boards, but the different, you've got different trace layout, the way the tracks are laid out. If you look at, for example, and I'm going off memory here, I haven't got one to hand, but if you look at, say, the MV1B or the 1C, the traces are a lot shorter, the board's a lot shorter. You have things like the Yamaha and stuff on the back plane on one or two of those. It's like right next to the the expansion, the cart slot there. So you've got a shorter distance for things to travel. The noise is perhaps being tidied up and improved and things on those, where you've got single type chip solutions and things for some of the main ASICs. They've been swapped out for single chips and things like that. So some of those more modern boards run a lot cleaner. You've got cleaner signals, shorter distances to travel, etc. Whereas something like the MV1FZ, it's kind of, it's similar in many ways to the newer AES board. It has the same chipset there, but yeah, the layout is not that optimal in places, and it doesn't surprise me really that the MV1FZ's got, has some of the issues. Some of the other boards are slightly better laid out and things. But I was going to show you some of the footage there. I won't be talking over it. I'll just literally show you some interesting clips with a few comments as I go through and just show some of the funny and interesting things I've discovered, whilst I was testing. But as I say, the Neo SD team themselves, they'll have tested considerably, and there were 2 or 3 others of us as well. A few people on the NEO-GEO forums there, and Razula. We were testing all the different firmware releases and things. So between us, we must have spent thousands of hours testing this. I mean, I must have programmed my cart here a couple of 100 times in the space of about 2 weeks, maybe even more. It's a good job these things have got like a 100,000 plus number of programs before they start to lose their bit here and there. So they're pretty resilient, and that's an important point as well, I guess, because someone posted a comment on one of my previous videos saying, these things, you can't flash them very much, after a few hundred flashes you're going to be knackered. No, that's not the case at all. The chips that you use on here, you can flash them like a minimum of like 100,000 times. So yeah, bear in mind how long it takes to program a game and how often you would change a game. 100,000 programs, that's going to take quite a while to get through, I would think, and even then you might be lucky enough if it's just one chip starts to glitch out, you can just replace that chip. You'll probably still be able to get spares for these, and 20 years from now, I bet in 20 years from now they're still all running 100%. So the last firmware update I got, I think, in fact it wasn't actually, the last one I've had, it's just perfected some of the UI stuff, I think, the interface stuff, but the one before that was the one that got everything 100% for me, and you wouldn't believe it, when it arrived, it actually arrived Christmas Day. It was actually lunchtime on the 25th of December. I got the final firmware update that solved my issues here. But prior to that, I was having some problems with CRC issues. Now, if you'd read some of my posts on the forums and things, you could see I was kicking off a bit. I was a bit moany about it. The CRC issues were driving me nuts. It kind of smelt to me like it was a crosstalk issue, and that's interesting in the sense that you've got to, with certain problems like that, where you think you might have a crosstalk issue, it might not necessarily be. There's numerous reasons, and you'll have come across this yourself before in anything to do with electronics. There's many reasons you can see similar behaviour between similar types of problems. So it's very easy to, it was easy for me at the time to jump to the wrong conclusion. It didn't appear to be a crosstalk issue, and I can only apologise really for the grief that I was perhaps giving the Neo SD team leading up to Christmas, because I was getting pretty stressed. The amount of testing that I had to do, and I was convinced it was a crosstalk issue, but it wasn't. Now the timing was, a factor, let's say. Maybe the synchronisation on the clock edges and things, the PLL stuff that was going on there perhaps wasn't quite optimal at that time, but it was for the majority of MVS systems, and not just, not for the system I'm playing on here. But ultimately, my problems were all caused, I think, the CRC issues were all caused by the master clock, some jitter. I think I had some jitter on there, and I'll show you some clips of that now, just so you can see what I had to do. Update the firmware here. I just wanted to show you what's happening with the CRCs, because I think that's going to be a clue. Now I think from memory it was bank 2 and bank 4 that randomly play up, so it's like it's like a timing thing related to those particular address bits with this game. Well, I found one problem straight away actually here. You might not be able to see this, but the can is not touching this wire here. You know, it's not grounded, the can. Sorry, I'll just zoom you out a little bit if I can. Just get my meter, put it on continuity test. We test from ground, so I'm on the edge shape, but I can't see it here actually. If I just point you down, I'm on the first pin there, on the ground of the jammer. And if I touch the actual wire, as you'll hear, you know it's grounded. If I touch the can, nothing. The can is not grounded. So I'm going to stick some solder just on the edge to join the can to that, because it's flapping in the breeze there, that crystal, and it's a good millimetre, you know, clear all the way around that strap. So yeah, there's no way that crystal can is grounded. That might be part of the problem. So as you can see there, what I ended up having to do is ground the crystal. Now many of these MVS boards, they've had the glue knocked off them. Some of them, you know, you've got glue on the crystal there holding it down. Others it's soldered on. Others it's just, you know, the wire strap that goes around it is crimped really tight and it makes a nice snug fit. So that was an interesting, you know, observation or discovery for me. It was at the point when I just dug out my logic analyzer and I was about to start looking at the clocks that go into the LSPC chip and, you know, the graphics chip and the D0 there, and it was before that I actually noticed the crystal. I thought, let's just have a look at the, you know, the main crystal first, and then lo and behold, you know, I spotted that the strap there was not making a connection, and that was ultimately why it was intermittent. That was why I was getting intermittent CRC issues. It was that crystal, some jitter. I'm assuming. I didn't spend any time then at that point because you know, I didn't even get the logic analyzer. There's no point, because it would have taken me quite a while to do, and I was really just surprised actually that the CRC problem's just gone away instantly the minute I did that. And I did then test quickly on one of my other MV1FZ boards, and I removed the ground strap from there, tested it, lo and behold, CRC issues. So, and I might be able to demonstrate that in a later video if anyone's interested. There's nothing really much to show you other than you lift the strap, you boot the car, do a CRC check, you know, do it several times, you'll get a CRC issue. Put the ground strap back, repeat the process, CRC issues gone away. And there's also a new version of the firmware publicly available now, so you might want to pull that version down. And as I showed in the previous video, these things work perfectly on 4 slots as well. So as you can see, the little the noise that was there before, the lines that were on the envelope, those are okay. So that seems to have been fixed by this firmware update. But just watch the background, the purple background that appears behind the characters, because that breaks up. It's like it's drawn in 3 sections. Not just yet, in a minute. Right, look at that. See how it's breaking up? So you can see it flickering down the right. So like there's something wrong there. That could be that P-ROM problem, as Raz said. And if you just watch this now, it'll do the same thing where when it's up close on the lady's face, the hair breaks up as it scrolls across. And as I say, that doesn't happen on a multi-car, it doesn't happen on an original. So on the 4 slot here, it boots the menu every time. I'll show you, got the 4 slot down here, and this is the one with a Pro chipset, you know, a Pro B0, etc. on there, the old original one, not the same chipset that's on an MV1FZ. The menu boots, you can program a game, no problems. Click launch game, and you'll see what happens. You get the memory test or whatever it is there at the beginning, and then it just resets, you get the watchdog. But if you just leave it, sometimes, I'll just leave it a few seconds now, sometimes it starts to load the game, and then it glitches out again. So it's almost there on the 4 slot, and I have tested all 4 slots on this. It does the same in any of the 4 slots. And obviously I put any of the game in this 4 slot and they work fine. I'll know more when I test more this evening. But as you can see, yeah, it's a bit intermittent there. We'll just do that one more time. Let's just skip that because it always seems to bank 0. So we're on Metal Slug 5 here. On the 4th pass actually I've got a not good. So it's not, the CRC issue is not completely fixed. Strange on King of Fighters, like I say, I went through 10 times and didn't get a single, not good at all. Can you see the background flickering at the bottom? Can you see the image flickering and stuff? So, and on the right hand side as well up here. I just thought I'd just point that out. That's obviously I'm on a beta firmware here, but that's just something else I noticed. You know, come out there, it's okay. Go back into the menu. It's a 50-50. Look, it's okay now. Try it again. You can see the flickering thing going on here on the vines and on the characters actually. You can see what's happening here. If I press this, in fact you can see it doing its own there, it's just reset. So if I press select, try and edit credit, oh look, it started, click start, let's start the game. Oh, it's gone. Now, I know that there's no CRC issues or anything like that, because one thing I did do is I went back out to the Unibars and did a CRC check, and whilst I was like halfway through, I think the third CRC check, it did the same thing. It looped back round again, it rebooted itself. The intro was fine, but see the floating character, did you see that then? There's an issue with timing there where one of the characters seems to float and they stay sometimes stuck like that. It's doing it again. And at the top, you might not be able to see it, it flickers a little bit. You get like shimmering going on. Sometimes, I mean, it's on this game, it's probably normal, but on Super Sidekicks 4, for example, that's over the whole screen. It's like the original flickering pixel issue, you know, the little flickering lines or whatever they were. But all the time, that's the main issue that I've spotted through different games. And sometimes actually, when you go back to the menu, let's try that now. There you can do it now. See that? That's the sort of thing you see in Super Sidekicks without the blocks, just the lines. Can you see the little dots there? So I'm going to apply the latest firmware update here. Let's see if this fixes the problem. So I just switch it on. Got the UPD file in the root of the micro SD there. Fingers crossed. Might need to select this. Oh no, there you go. So this is what you'll see with a non-forced update, standard update. If you've got a forced one, you just see the crosshatch, and that was the clue to me about the way it works. You know, as I mentioned in the previous video, you know, the way it forces the update there. You know, I think it's spotting the ARM processor spotting the forced update on the SD card, micro SD card, and it's disabling you know, the normal boot facility. So the MVS is just sat there, it thinks there's no carts in, and yeah, that was why I sort of jumped to that conclusion really about the way that works. It seems that way to me. Still flashing. Still flashing. When I say it's flashing, I'm talking about the LED. You can see activity. So that's invoked to reset. Let's just see if that's fixed it. I'm hoping it has. It might not have done that. It's the King of Fighters, isn't it? So let's just see what happens now. Yeah, that's just looking spot on. They've nailed it. They've nailed it again. Absolutely cute, you know, major kudos to the Neo SD team, TerraOnion. Fantastic. These guys in Spain absolutely rock. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So as you can see, I've got it in slot 2 there on the 4 slot, and if I point you to the TV, you can see we've got King of Fighters 2013 running again there. I've not got the sound on at the moment, but you'll have to trust me, the sound works fine. I've been playing this considerably actually on the 4 slot, and this is fine. But there's just something I want to point out actually. If you've got a 4 slot or a 2 slot, I do think these have been tested on 2 slots from what I read. I think Raz mentioned it, been tested on the 2 slot. Just disconnect the power, hang on a sec. You can see where the SD slot is here. It's very close to the edge. So I mean, obviously once it's in a shell, you won't have any issues, but if you're testing one of these bare boards like this until you get the shell, just be mindful of of that there, because you could very easily snag it on here if you're not careful, and in fact just once or twice, as I've just been easing it in, I've managed to get it to eject the car like that just by getting too close to the edge. So you've got to be really careful when you've got these 4 slot shells. You can, it's like, say, if it goes in perfectly straight, you can see there's about a millimetre gap there, you're okay. But if you just happen to edge it, one side and then the other, it's very easy to just push that out like that, and then it's like, say, can you see that's just flicked out? But that again, like I say, is only really an issue when it's not inside a shell. When you've got a shell around it, it ain't going to be a problem. But what I'll do is I'll boot the 4 slot up again now, and we'll program some games just so you can see the time difference versus, because obviously this has got a new firmware versus the old video. I'll work out the percentage of how much faster it is. I think it's about 30%, perhaps just a bit more than 30%. So there you go. You can see I've got King of Fighters 2000, the Neo SD, Top Players Golf, and King of Monsters 2. Now the interesting thing is, and this could still be a little bug, I'm not sure, it could be my MVS because I've not got a battery in here, but I found that sometimes you've got to go in and change the region on the unibars, or not really the region, but change it from, say, console to MVS and back again, or whatever, and then it then detects the game's the multiple slot thing, the select button works. I'm not really sure what would cause that. It could be a unibars thing, let's say, it could be the fact that I've not had a battery in, but as you can see, you've got King of Monsters there, hit select, that's going to be King of Fighters 2000, that's the Neo SD, so that's Strikers 1945, and Top Players Golf. So yeah, this does actually work. Let's just reboot that, and I'll show you can also hold down the AB, the AD and start or whatever you've chosen for your trigger, and you can get into the menu. So let's just see what comes up there. Is that going to be Top Players, is it? Yeah, so hit select, King Monsters, select, there we go. Hold down AD start or into the Neo SD menu, that works fine. And we'll program another game like this, and it should boot out and hopefully go to that game. What was a short one I loaded last time? I think it was Magician Lord. Let's do that one, because it'd be interesting to see how much quicker that is actually. I'll do the AES version again. That's super quick. So it's rebooting. Let's just see which game this is now. Oh, there you go, Magician Lord. So it's loaded that game. Hit select, Top Players, King of Monsters, King of Fighters 2000. Superb. So just quickly here, I thought I'd show you the backup RAM save support as well actually. If you just wait for the high score table to come up here, you should see it's initialised because I've just booted this from having a flat battery. But one of the things I've been doing with this particular game as I've been playing it is, making sure I load and save my backups and things, to see if I can improve my score. And I've been testing this for a few weeks now, playing this game a fair bit, and I can't quite beat it on the easiest level with the default sort of 3 credits or 4 credits, whatever you get. I get right to the boss and can get the boss down to about 50% of his health and I was done. As you can see, the scoreboard there, that's just default. If I now go back to the menu by holding down AD and start, you'll see in the new version of the the latest version of the firmware here, you can press start and you get these options here, and this is what I was hoping they would add, and it has been in the last several versions of firmware actually, but it wasn't the release one. This manual load backup RAM and save backup RAM. So if you've got like me, a system where you're not using the backup battery, this is ideal. You can switch off the automatic load and save the backup RAM and just do it manually. So if I load the backup RAM for this game now, just launch it, and we'll just wait for the high score table to come up again, you'll see that it works fine. It's dead reliable. There you go, you can see I've got all 5 places on the scoreboard there. So yeah, that backup and load, you know, back save and load options, they work really well. So there you go, all programmed okay. I'll just wait for it to start. Now I've played this all the way through to the very end. I'll show you the checksum in a sec.
Mission 1.
Sweet.
Start. Thank you.
So if I reboot that, go to the unibars, go to CRC check, you should see come back with good serials, CRCs. There you go. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon.